Yes, in the previous session we covered 2 points for the ecosystem structure and function. One was productivity, the other is decomposition. Productivity is of two types, primary and secondary. The energy formed by the producers is called as primary, and the new form of energy formed by the consumers is called as secondary. Primary, in fact, again is of two types. We have gross primary and net primary. The total photosynthetic output or done by the producers is GPP. When you deduct the respiratory losses, you will end up with NPP. And we did the biosphere NPP annual value also as 170 billion tons. And the land share and the water share. The water is 55, the land is 115. And we did the reason also for the same. Decomposition, 5 steps in decomposition, starting from fragmentation, catabolism, leaching, humification and mineralization. Okay. The third component and the most vital component of it is energy flow. Right? As I said, the fourth part, nutrient cycling, has been eliminated, deleted from your syllabus. The most important thing for identifying the energy flow, right, is the fact that there is only one source of energy for all the ecosystems around, that is sun. All ecosystems, they derive their energy from the sun, except deep sea hydrothermal ecosystems. It is but obvious. The sunlight is not penetrating right up to the depths of the ocean. It will only go up to a certain point, and beyond that point, photosynthesis is not going to occur, so it's going to be chemosynthesis. So it's going to be chemosynthesis beyond that. So who is running the deep sea hydrothermal? The chemosynthetic organisms are running those. Okay. Now, having identified sun as the source, now for the sunlight to reach Earth, it has to pass through atmosphere, and a fraction of it, a larger fraction of it is now getting scattered. So it is the entire sunlight does not reach, right? But whatever reaches may be passing through layers of atmosphere. Whatever reaches is called as ISR, incident solar radiation. Right? So whatever falls on the earth is incident, it's on point, right? So it's called as ISR, incident solar radiation. So sunlight, so we take what falls on the earth is ISR. Now this ISR has two parts. One is PAR, the other is non-PAR, that is photosynthetically active radiation. Right? So a part of this ISR is PAR, that is plants can take this up and perform photosynthesis, and the remaining part is non-PAR. Now what the NCERT is saying, of the incident solar radiation, that means हमारे पास total incident हो रहा है, ISR अपना total value है, less than 50% of it is PAR. So PAR, right? So less than 50 should be 49 also will satisfy this value, right? This is PAR. So obviously the remaining portion is the non-PAR. Now photosynthesis में we have identified the range of 400 to 700 as PAR. That is the visible spectrum, right? On one end we have violet and the other we have red. So what is pre-hand is ultraviolet, and what is after this is infrared, both not visible to the eye. So the visible spectrum only lies between 400 to 700, and that is what is PAR. So what they are mentioning is less than 50% almost is the PAR component. Okay, जो visible spectrum है वो. Okay, but out of this PAR, plants are able to take up only 2 to 10%. That means ये PAR भी plants are not using up totally. Out of the PAR available, plants are capable of taking up only 2 to 10% of this. And this is enough for the entire ecosystem to run, or the biosphere. So what comes from the sun, number one, complete sunlight does not reach earth. Scattering होता है. जितना पहुंचता है वो ISR. ISR में से 50% PAR है. PAR का 2 to 10% is taken up by the plants to run the entire system. So if it is 2 to 10% of PAR, isn't it 1 to 5% of ISR? बराबर ना? अगर इसका 2 to 10% है, ये 50 है ना? तो जब मैं इसका कैलकुलेट करूंगा तो ये 1 to 5% हो जाएगा. So please be careful in the exam. What have they asked? Have they asked the percentage of PAR or incident radiation? If they are asking that plants are able to take up dash percentage of PAR, your answer is going to be 2 to 10. Of the incident solar radiation, answer is going to be 1 to 5. Am I making this clear, please? Because यहाँ पर running test में it is written 2 to 10, so we blindly copy that. Okay, हाँ कितना plants is 2 to 10, खत्म. So please be careful what they are asking. Is it PAR or ISR? Okay. So important to know how the solar energy captured by plants flows through different organisms of an ecosystem. So we are studying what is the energy flow through this entire ecosystem. Right? So first of all, we have identified the source of energy. We have identified the amount of energy fixed by the plants. Once this is identified by what are the different organisms through which this energy is going to flow. All organisms are dependent for their food on producers, directly or indirectly. So you find unidirectional flow of energy from the sun to the producers and then to consumers. Sun to the producers and to the consumers. Please, unidirectional का मतलब है only in this direction. It cannot run in the opposite direction. If I mark an arrow exactly in the opposite, you will say, sir, ये भी तो unidirectional है, sir. It will not happen. Your unidirectional implies that it will run only in this direction. This is the unidirectional flow. Now, the last point for this part. थोड़ा सा physics आ गया यहाँ पे. Ahan understood my stick. Right now? Right. Physics comes now. I get cold feet. Come. You also. Anyways, ecosystems are not exempted or not exempt from the second law of thermodynamics. Now, first law of thermodynamics, universally known, तुम्हारा conservation वाला. वो right ना? Constant है, change होगा, transfer होगा, blah blah. Okay, that is your first law. Now, second law about thermodynamics is about entropy, if you have heard of this term, right? Now, we don't want to complicate things in a biology class about thermodynamics law. You can harass your physics teachers for that, right? I am not the right person for that. Okay. Now, entropy ko, if you want to give a very simple word, it is chaos, disorderliness. Usko bolte hain entropy. Now, the law in very simple terms says that if there is no continuous flow of energy from the source, the system falls into an entropy. The system falls into a chaos or a disorder. That is the basic law. They are saying that this is applicable to ecosystem also. Ecosystem is not exempted from this law. So for an ecosystem to run smoothly, What is the condition? A continuous source of energy. So they need a constant supply of energy to synthesize the molecules they require. They matlab kaun? Ecosystems. By they means ecosystem. So ecosystems need a constant supply of energy to synthesize the molecules they require. Why do they want a continuous source of energy? To counteract the universal tendency towards increasing disorderliness. Increasing disorderliness is your entropy. So if, ulta pado, if we want to counteract this disorderliness, we require continuous supply of energy. Right? तो ये जो है वो सेकेंड लॉ है और वो बोल रहे हैं कि इवन इकोसिस्टम्स फॉलो दिस सेकेंड लॉ ऑफ थर्मोडायनामिक्स, राइट? बिकॉज यहां पर अपना फोकस इज द सोर्स एंड फ्लो ऑफ एनर्जी. दैट्स व्हाई दे हैव गिवन सेकेंड लॉ का रेफरेंस, राइट? इसके आगे और कोई फिजिक्स यहां पे अप्लाई अपने को नहीं करना है. राइट ना? अ कांस्टेंट सप्लाई ऑफ एनर्जी इज रिक्वायर्ड फॉर synthesizing the molecules, right? And this is a requirement to counteract what? Disorderliness, right? So if I have to prevent disorderliness, I want a smooth flow. What do I need now? A constant supply of energy. I am just reading it in the ulta way to make it a little more simple for us. Okay? So ecosystems are not exempted from this second law. They also follow this second law. Yes.
So the constant supply we mean at the right time and at the right amount of it.
Now, which are the organisms? Yes, beta.
So basically it means that the molecules which they synthesize is then used to counteract
if energy is not available, then how will they synthesize, beta? Right? Now the organisms required to run this entire show, right? The first ones are the producers. Obviously, the green plants in the ecosystem are producers. In a terrestrial, obviously at the start we divided ecosystems into terrestrial and aquatic. So, terrestrial mein we have herbaceous woody plants. Aquatic ecosystem, species like phytoplanktons, algae and higher plants, right? We have learnt earlier what are phytoplanktons, right? Now, planktons. Right? Planktons are organisms which float passively in water. Planktons are organisms which float passively with water currents. If those organisms are plants, we call them as phytoplanktons. If those organisms are animals, we call them as zooplanktons. Right? And last time बताया था मैंने, what are zooplanktons? They are the herbivores of this system. Consumers, all animals depend on plants directly or indirectly for their requirements of food. Hence they are called consumers, also called as heterotrophs. If they feed on producers, the plants, that is, they are called as primary consumers. And if animals are eating other animals, which in turn plants, they are called as secondary consumers. Likewise, you can have tertiary consumers also. Obviously, the primary consumers are going to be herbivores. Some of the common herbivores are insects. 25% of insects are phytophagous. Okay, na? Okay. Some of the common herbivores are insects, birds, mammals in the terrestrial ecosystem, and mollusks in an aquatic ecosystem. So mollusk is a herbivore and mollusk can be taken up by echinoderms. So echinoderms are carnivores, Piscator, top predator. Okay, so echinoderms are carnivores, mollusks are herbivores in an aquatic ecosystem. The consumers that feed on these herbivores obviously are called carnivores, or more correctly primary carnivores. Right now, please. यहाँ पर I will give you example of अपना standard example. That is more interesting. Grass, grasshopper, frog. ना? So is frog a secondary consumer here? But isn't it the first carnivore of the line also? So that's why instead of calling it a secondary consumer, you can call it as a primary carnivore also. क्या लिखा है देखो, or more correctly. So a secondary consumer से ज़्यादा correct, the term is a primary carnivore. Likewise, the next level would be a secondary carnivore. So a tertiary consumer would also be called as a secondary carnivore. Right now? I think in one of the DCDs शायद मैंने ये question डालूंगा शायद. हाँ, primary, secondary carnivore. Sometimes creates confusion in the test also. मजा आता है. Okay. The animals that depend on primary carnivores for food are labeled as secondary carnivores. So please, wherever the word secondary consumer comes, bracket में make a note, it is a primary carnivore. And likewise for a next level, tertiary consumer also. ठीक है ना? So the organisms which are involved in this are the producers and consumers. Now the link which the organisms form amongst themselves are food chains and food webs. Those are the ones they form this link. Right? Now, food chains obviously we have learnt at school. School में पढ़ा है हमने. I remember distinctly when I studied food chain, 6th, 7th, maybe, I don't remember. Right? The teacher gives a very cute definition. Right? The process of eating or getting eaten up is called food chain. Very simple, sweet definition. Right? Now either you eat something or you are eaten up by something. So that is called as food chain. Starting from plants, food chains. Now see, this is very interesting. Food chains, but they have chosen or rather webs. Or rather webs. Now by this small addition, the NCERT is conveying something very important to us. Is that food chains is rather you should refer to a food web. In life, in ecosystem, food web is more real, food chain is theoretical. We go back to the same example. अपना वही standard ग्रास ग्रासहॉपर, इसको बराबर से आता है, बराबर ना? ग्रास ग्रासहॉपर, फ्रॉग, स्नेक, हॉक. हॉक, अच्छा ईगल, चलिए. It is eagle, no problem. Okay. So now when you consider and believe this to be true, sir, this is the food chain. Right? What we are implying is they are discussing more important. So I'll wait for that.
No, she couldn't find long in the NCERT. She was writing the entire thing.
This is an NCERT only.
I know, no, she was signing it.
God bless you.
Oh,
Oh, yeah.
That is a study from notes. Okay. Now, when we look at the standard example of a food chain and we try to imagine this existing as an independent entity in nature, and grass is taken up by grasshopper, grasshopper is taken up by frog. What we are implying is that the frog has only one source of food, that is grasshopper, which is wrong. An organism always has multiple sources of food. If the organism has multiple sources of food, is the organism at any point of time a part of many food chains?
Yeah.
And all those food chains are intersecting at that point?
Yeah.
So that is what makes it a food web. Right? So food chain, for a food chain to independently exist in nature is very difficult. So what is more practical in an ecosystem is a food web. That's why they are using or rather webs. Such animal feeds on a plant or another animal, this in turn is food for the another. The chain or the web is formed because of this interdependency. No energy that is trapped into an organism remains in it forever. There are only two options. Either the organism is taken up by another organism, so the energy gets transferred, or the organism dies. If it dies, it is at the mercy of the decomposer. Again, the decomposer is going to break down, that organic is going to get converted to inorganic, it will go back to the soil. So energy cannot remain trapped inside an organism forever. the energy trapped by the producer hence is either passed on to a consumer to a higher trophic level or to the organism dies. Once it dies, does it become a part of the detritus? It becomes a part of the detritus. Right? Now, here is where